I thought I had it all figured out at 31, a perfect marriage, a comfortable life. But one innocent-looking Saturday morning, my wife Clara gave me an ultimatum that didn't just unravel my world, it exposed a betrayal so deep, it felt like my entire reality was built on quicksand. Main story: my name is Marcus, and 3 years into my marriage with Clara, I genuinely believed we were invincible. We had that picture-perfect, Instagram-ready life, steady jobs we loved to complain about, an overpriced apartment we swore was charming, and those naive 5-year plans couples concoct when they're high on optimism and low on actual life experience. Clara, at 29, was still navigating her discovery phase through questionable decisions and artisan coffee, but I was so blindly in love, I barely noticed. Our existence was this beautifully boring cruise, making my parents proud and my single friends mildly envious. I should have known the universe was just setting me up for the ultimate punchline. That's when Adrian decided to make his grand, unwelcome re-entrance. Adrian, even his name sounds like a guy who'd order expensive wine at Applebee's and pretend he was a connoisseur. He was Clara's ex-husband, a detail she'd dropped casually 6 months into our relationship like it was a fun fact, not a seismic event. Oh, by the way, I was married to this guy for 2 years, but he was emotionally unavailable and had commitment issues. Classic red flag, expertly disguised as vulnerable honesty. And I, like a fool, swallowed it whole. But when Mr. Emotionally Unavailable returned to our small town, Clara suddenly developed an insatiable urge to catch up. What started as an innocent Saturday brunch at a pretentious downtown cafe, the one where $12 avocado toast is called artisanal, quickly morphed into an Adrian-themed takeover of our entire weekend. From brunches where they'd gaze into each other's eyes over Eggs Benedict, it escalated to Sunday park strolls because Adrian was apparently having an existential crisis that only Clara's unique brand of emotional support could fix. Then came the Friday movie nights because poor Adrian was going through a rough patch and needed someone to hold his hand through the latest Marvel flick. Funny how his rough patch always seemed to perfectly coincide with our planned date nights. I tried to be the understanding husband, I really did. I dredged up every piece of marriage advice I'd ever heard and ignored, attempting to trust my wife. But trust, I learned, is like trying to ignore a mosquito buzzing around your head. You can pretend it's not there for a while, but eventually, you're going to get bit, and it's going to itch like hell. The signs were glaring, but I was fluent in denial. Clara started wearing a new perfume, something expensive and sultry, that made our apartment smell like a department store. She'd spend an hour on her hair for these casual friend meetings, styling it in ways that screamed anything but casual. And her phone? Don't even get me started. My wife, who used to barely glance at her screen during our conversations, was suddenly giggling like a teenager with her first crush. The worst part? She laughed at her phone more than she laughed at my jokes. And my jokes are, at minimum, comedy bronze. When your wife finds her phone more entertaining than you, it's time for a serious life reevaluation. The supporting cast of this tragicomedy included Leah, Clara's best friend, who had appointed herself cheerleader-in-chief for this disaster. Leah was one of those friends who dispenses terrible advice with unshakable confidence, like a GPS constantly recalculating but never actually getting you where you need to go. Marcus, she'd say with that patronizing smile, you need to understand exes can absolutely be just friends. It's actually really mature and healthy. Because nothing screams emotional maturity like spending every waking weekend with the person you divorced. Then there was Jordan, my best friend and the silent voice of reason I chose to ignore. He had this incredible ability to raise an eyebrow in a way that screamed, "Dude, are you seriously not seeing this?" without uttering a single word. He'd give me that look every time I mentioned Clara's weekend plans, but being the good friend he was, he'd just tell me to keep cool and trust the process. The process, as it turned out, was my marriage slowly imploding while I clung to a facade of normalcy. God, I tried to keep cool. I perfected the fake smile for when Clara came home, radiating from her friend dates. I bit my tongue when she'd spend an hour getting ready for coffee with Adrian. I even managed to nod along as she recounted their deep conversations and shared memories, as if I was supposed to be thrilled that my wife was emotionally reconnecting with her ex-husband every weekend. The unease festered in my chest like a growing tumor, feeding on every cancelled plan, every hushed phone call, every time she chose Adrian over me. But I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was the problem, that I needed to be more secure. What I didn't realize was that my marriage was already dead. I was just the last one to get the memo. The breaking point wasn't a dramatic movie scene where I walked in on them. No, it arrived on a perfectly ordinary Saturday morning, with the subtle impact of a freight train to the face. I was nursing cold coffee, pretending to read the news, when Clara glided out of our bedroom looking like she was headed to a photo shoot. Her hair was done, that effortless but actually took an hour look she reserved for Adrian. The expensive perfume hit me first, making her smell like a walking, talking cartoon character on a mission. She was wearing the sundress I bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she'd claimed was too fancy for every day. Apparently, it was just fancy enough for casual coffee with her ex-husband. "Morning, babe," she chirped, grabbing her purse and checking her reflection in the toaster. I finally looked up from my phone, where I'd been scrolling the same cryptocurrency article for 20 minutes. "Let me guess," I said, trying to keep my voice flat, "another emergency Adrian session?" She paused. For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face, guilt, maybe, or annoyance that I dared question her sacred Saturday ritual. "We're just getting coffee, Marcus. He's still going through that rough patch, remember?" Ah, yes, the mysterious 3-month rough patch that demanded more attention than a newborn. I wondered what it truly entailed, his commitment issues? His inability to find a decent apartment? Or perhaps the devastating realization that he'd let Clara slip away? My money was on the latter. "Actually," I said, setting my phone down, looking directly at her, "I was thinking we could try that new place downtown today. You know, the one with the bottomless mimosas you've been talking about for weeks?" The suggestion hung in the air like a bad smell. Clara's face cycled through confusion, then irritation, then that special kind of exasp. Irritation reserved for husbands who dare to want to spend time with their wives. She rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair of a teenager asked to clean her room. "Marcus, we've been over this a million times. Adrian and I are just friends. We're adults, we can handle a platonic relationship, right?" "Platonic," I repeated slowly. "Got it. That's why you're wearing the anniversary dress and enough perfume to knock out a horse." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, but her hand instinctively smoothed the fabric of the dress. "I always dress nicely when I go out." That was rich, coming from the woman who wore sweatpants to the grocery store and considered mascara a special occasion. But I wasn't done. Call it masochistic, but I needed to hear her say it. "So, skip it today," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "One Saturday. Stay home with your husband. We'll make pancakes, binge-watch something terrible on Netflix, maybe even have an actual conversation that doesn't revolve around Adrian's emotional well-being." You would have thought I'd asked her to donate a kidney. Her face contorted as if I'd suggested we murder puppies for fun. "I can't just bail on him, Marcus. He's expecting me." And there it was. The truth, wrapped up neatly with a bow. Adrian was expecting her, not hoping, not casually available, but expecting her, like she was his employee, his therapy appointment, his guaranteed Saturday morning entertainment. "What about what I'm expecting?" I asked, the edge finally creeping into my voice. "What about the fact that your husband might want to spend time with you occasionally?" That's when she delivered the line that changed everything, the words that would replay in my head for weeks like a broken record. She straightened up, hands on her hips, looking at me with the conviction usually reserved for courtroom dramas. "If you don't trust me hanging out with my ex-husband every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be together." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the neighbor's dog, a car starting down the street, the hum of our refrigerator. But mostly, I heard the sound of my marriage officially ending. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd promised to love, now standing in our kitchen, wearing my anniversary gift to meet another man, while giving me ultimatums about trust. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. You're absolutely right, I finally said, my voice calmer than I felt. Her face twisted in confusion. This was clearly not the response she expected. She'd probably anticipated tears, begging, maybe a good old-fashioned fight. But I meant it. In that moment, watching her stand there, ready to choose her ex-husband over me for the umpteenth time, I realized something profound. I was done. Not just with Adrian, not just with the disrespect and the lying by omission, but with the entire charade of pretending this marriage was salvageable. You see, for months, I'd been sitting on something Clara didn't know about, something huge. My company had offered me a dream position, a transfer to their London office with a salary that would make our current finances look like pocket change. We're talking $130,000 a year, a fully furnished 3-bedroom flat overlooking the Thames, my own team to manage. It was the kind of opportunity career counselors fantasize about. I turned it down twice because every time I brought up moving, Clara would shut it down faster than a nightclub at closing time. I can't leave my family, Marcus. My whole life is here. What about my job? My friends? What she really meant was, what about Adrian? Well, congratulations, Clara. You just solved that problem for me. That night, after she'd flounced out for her coffee date, I composed an email, London position acceptance. The message was even simpler, I'll take it. When can I start? The response came back in 2 hours, 2 weeks. Welcome to the team. I smiled for the first time in months. The next morning, Clara woke up with that post-ultimatum regret, the kind that hits like a hangover after drunk texting your ex. She shuffled into the kitchen, where I was already dressed, sipping coffee, and scrolling through London apartment listings like a man who'd just discovered Christmas morning. The panic in her eyes was almost comical, like a cartoon character realizing they'd walked off a cliff. Marcus, she started, her voice doing that weird thing where it goes up at the end, I think maybe we should talk about yesterday. I looked up from my phone, admiring a particularly nice flat in Canary Wharf. Talk about what, exactly? Your coffee date with Adrian? How it went? Whether you two discussed our marriage over lattes and croissants? Her face cycled through pale, pink, red, then that special shade of mortified when someone realizes they've screwed up beyond repair. That's not, we didn't, Marcus, I think you misunderstood what I said yesterday. Oh, this was rich. The classic you misunderstood me defense, as if the English language had suddenly become too complex for my simple male brain. I set down my phone, giving her my full attention. Really? Help me understand then. When you said, and I quote, if you don't trust me hanging out with my ex-husband every weekend, maybe we shouldn't be together, what exactly did you mean? Because to my admittedly limited understanding, that sounded like an ultimatum. She started doing that rapid-fire explanation women do when they're caught in their own trap, somehow making everything worse. I was just frustrated, okay? You've been so jealous and suspicious lately, and I felt like you were trying to control who I could be friends with. I didn't mean we should actually break up. I just meant that trust is important in a relationship. Ah, trust. The magic word cheaters use when they want to gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. You're absolutely right, I said, standing up and grabbing my car keys. Trust is important. So is respect. And common sense. And not spending every weekend with your ex-husband while your actual husband sits at home like a chump. That's when the waterworks started. Clara's eyes filled like a broken dam. Suddenly, I was the villain. Amazing how quickly the script flips when people realize there are consequences for their actions. Where are you going? She sniffled, as if I was abandoning her to join the French Foreign Legion instead of heading to work. London, I said simply. I accepted the transfer yesterday. I start in 2 weeks. The silence was so complete, I could have heard a pin drop in the next zip code. Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her brain unable to process. You what? You can't. We never discussed. Marcus, you can't just decide to move to London without talking to me. The irony was so beautiful, it almost brought a tear to my eye. The same woman who'd been making unilateral decisions about our weekends for months was suddenly concerned about couple communication. Funny thing about ultimatums, Clara, I said, when you give someone an either/or choice, you have to be prepared for them. To pick the option you don't want. I left her standing in our kitchen, still in her pajamas, looking like someone had just told her Santa Claus wasn't real and the Easter Bunny was a registered sex offender. The next 2 weeks were pure reality TV drama, cranked to 11. Clara cycled through all 5 stages of grief, sometimes multiple times a day. Denial came first. You're being dramatic, Marcus, you'll come to your senses once you've cooled down, she'd say with air quotes. Then anger, she turned into a one-woman demolition crew, slamming doors and throwing accusations like confetti at a divorce party. I was abandoning her for money, running from my problems, emotionally immature because I couldn't handle her male friends. The last one was particularly hilarious, given her male friend was texting her at midnight and taking her to romantic restaurants every weekend. Bargaining was my personal favorite. Suddenly, Clara was full of compromises she'd never considered during the 3 months of Adrian Fest. What if I only see him once a month? What if you come with us? What if we do couples therapy? Too little, too late, sweetheart. You don't get to renegotiate terms after you've already blown up the contract. Depression hit when she realized I wasn't bluffing. I came home one day to find her on the couch, in the same clothes as yesterday, surrounded by tissues like she was preparing for the world's saddest snowball fight. I can't believe you're really leaving me, she sobbed. How can you just throw away 3 years of marriage? I'm not throwing it away, I replied, continuing to pack my boxes with the efficiency of a man who'd finally found his purpose. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. But the real magic happened when I started packing her stuff. See, Clara had conveniently forgotten that the lease for our apartment was in my name only. She'd insisted on keeping her parents' address for tax purposes, a cute euphemism for dodging civic responsibilities while enjoying all the benefits of adult life. I packed her belongings with the care of a professional moving service, organizing everything neatly in boxes and placing them by the front door like a thoughtful husband preparing for his wife's extended vacation. The look on her face when she came home to find her entire life summarized in cardboard containers was absolutely priceless. You can't kick me out, she screamed, somehow forgetting she'd never legally moved in. This is my home, too. Actually, I said, pulling out the lease agreement I'd thoughtfully highlighted, this is my home. You've been a guest. A very welcome guest for 3 years, but legally speaking, just a guest. And now, the guest room is needed for other purposes. That's when she ran to our friends, because nothing says mature adult handling a relationship crisis like running to mommy and daddy, or in this case, to Jordan and Leia and anyone else who would listen to her tale of woe about how her heartless husband was abandoning her for filthy lucre. Midway subscribe line, by the way, if you're still with me on this wild ride, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories and karmic justice are definitely coming your way. Main story, continued, but here's where the story gets really interesting. Remember Jordan, my best buddy with the expressive eyebrows? Well, Jordan had been doing some detective work of his own. The morning of my flight to London, I was feeling pretty damn good about life. Bags packed, new apartment keys awaiting me across the pond, and that special zen that comes from finally making a decision that doesn't suck. I was sipping coffee, mentally calculating my landing time, when the doorbell rang like the opening notes of a funeral march. I opened it to find Clara, flanked by her personal cavalry, her mother, Teresa, and younger sister, Hannah. They looked ready for either a funeral or an intervention, which, given the circumstances, was probably accurate on both counts. Teresa clutched her purse like it contained nuclear launch codes, while Hannah looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Marcus, sweetheart, Teresa began, pushing past me into the apartment with the confidence of someone who'd clearly planned this ambush. We need to talk. Oh, this was going to be good. I gestured them toward the living room, where my suitcases stood like silent witnesses to my impending freedom. Clara immediately eyed them like ticking time bombs while Teresa settled onto the couch, ready to conduct a boardroom meeting. This sudden move to London, Teresa continued, her voice dripping with that special brand of maternal concern that makes you feel 12 years old and in trouble for breaking a neighbor's window. It's clearly a cry for help, Marcus. You're having some sort of breakdown. And instead of working through it like adults, you're running away. A cry for help? Accepting a dream job with a massive salary increase and escaping a marriage more toxic than a Chernobyl picnic was obviously the behavior of someone who'd lost his marbles. I nodded thoughtfully, as if genuinely considering her psychological assessment. You're throwing your life away, she pressed on, warming up to her theme like a preacher hitting his stride. 3 years of marriage, all the memories you and Clara have built together, your home, your friends, all of it gone because you're having some sort of midlife crisis. Midlife crisis? I was 31. If this was my midlife crisis, it meant I was going to die at 62, which, considering the last few months, didn't sound entirely unreasonable. Hannah chimed in, because apparently, this was a tag team intervention. What about Clara? She demanded, shooting her sister a look of equal parts sympathy and exasperation. You can't just leave her behind like she doesn't matter. She loves you, Marcus. She made a mistake, sure, but everyone makes mistakes. A mistake, singular? As if Clara's 3-month emotional affair with her ex-husband was just an oops moment, like accidentally putting salt in her coffee. I was impressed by their ability to minimize the situation with such artistic flair. Clara herself had been unusually quiet during this opening salvo, probably still processing the sight of my packed luggage. But now she stepped forward, tears already forming, like an actress who'd been preparing for this scene her entire life. Marcus, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to sound authentically heartbroken, please don't do this. We can work through this. I'll stop seeing Adrian. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave me. And there it was. The performance I'd been expecting. The tearful confession, the promises to change, the desperate bargaining that comes when people realize they've pushed someone too far, and the consequences are finally catching up. It might have been touching if it hadn't come about 3 months and 17 Adrian dates too late. I looked at the three of them, Teresa with her righteous indignation, Hannah with her misplaced loyalty, and Clara with her crocodile tears, and realized this was the perfect moment for the grand finale. The piece de resistance that Jordan had uncovered. That's really touching, Clara, I said, pulling out my phone. But before we get too deep into the whole redemption arc, there's something I think everyone should see. I opened the screenshots Jordan had forwarded to me and held up my phone for all 3 women to see. The messages were from Adrian's private gym chat group, where he'd been bragging to his workout buddies like some suburban Casanova. The first message read, "Book club is just code. She's basically single now. 3 months of coffee dates and she's already planning to leave her husband for me." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Teresa's face went white. Hannah's mouth dropped open. Clara looked like someone had just told her her lottery ticket was fake. But wait, there was more. The next screenshot was even better. Her husband is such a cuck. Doesn't even know we've been hooking up in my car after every coffee date. She tells him we're just friends, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy. That last message hit Clara like a physical blow. Her face went from white to green to red in about 3 seconds, cycling through colors like a broken traffic light. Teresa slowly sank back into the couch, her intervention speech apparently forgotten in the face of actual evidence. Context. Clara suddenly screamed, finding her voice again. You don't understand the context. Adrian was he was lying to his friends. He was making it sound like more than it was. Context, I said mildly. The refuge of the caught cheater. What context, exactly? The context where you've been lying to me for 3 months? The context where you've been meeting your ex-husband every weekend while telling me it was innocent? Or the context where you gave me an ultimatum yesterday about trusting you? Hannah was looking at her sister like she'd never seen her before, which was probably accurate. Teresa had gone completely silent, realizing her daughter's marriage problems were a bit more complicated than she'd originally thought. "This is all taken out of context," Clara insisted, but her voice had lost all its conviction. She sounded like a defense attorney who just realized her client was guilty as sin, and the jury had already made up their minds. I looked at each of them in turn, letting the weight of the evidence settle in the room like dust after an explosion. "If you didn't mean the ultimatum," I said finally, "you shouldn't have given it." That ended the discussion more effectively than a gavel in a courtroom. Teresa gathered her purse and stood up without another word, deciding that a strategic retreat was better than continued engagement. Hannah followed suit, shooting Clara a look that suggested there would be some very interesting conversations in the family group chat later. Clara made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Marcus, please, my flight leaves in 4 hours, I interrupted, checking my watch with the casual efficiency of a man who had places to be and lives to live. "Jordan's coming to pick me up in 20 minutes. You might want to call Adrian. I'm sure he'll be very comforting during this difficult time." As they filed out of my apartment, my former apartment, I should say, Clara turned back one last time. "What am I supposed to do now?" "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're very resourceful when it comes to making plans." The door closed behind them with a satisfying click, and I was alone with my suitcases and my freedom. Landing at Heathrow was like stepping into a different universe where the air tasted like possibility instead of disappointment and betrayal. I'd left behind the smoking wreckage of my marriage and walked straight into what felt like the opening scene of a movie where the protagonist finally gets his life together. My new flat was everything the company had promised and more. Overlooking the Thames, floor-to-ceiling windows, 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, a view that made Clara's precious hometown look like a strip mall parking lot. Every morning, I'd wake up, watch the boats go by, and drink coffee that actually tasted good because it wasn't seasoned with resentment and marital dysfunction. My office was a revelation too: sharp, ambitious colleagues, no one named Adrian. For the first time in years, I was excited for Monday mornings. Meanwhile, back in the land of the free and home of the emotionally immature, Clara was struggling with the concept that actions have consequences. According to my LinkedIn feed, she'd decided to air her grievances publicly, posting one of those vague social media manifestos divorced people love so much. When someone you love abandons you without warning for money and career advancement, it really shows you who they truly are. Accompanied by a black and white photo of her looking pensively out a window, because nothing says authentic emotional pain like a carefully staged Instagram moment. But here's the thing about small towns and social media: everyone knows everyone's business. Clara had forgotten our entire social circle had been watching her Adrian show for 3 months. The comments were brutal, in that passive-aggressive way only Facebook comments can achieve. "Didn't you dump him for Adrian though?" wrote Jessica from yoga class. "Girl, we saw your stories every weekend with your friend," added Brittany with 17 crying laughing emojis. "Maybe check the dictionary definition of abandonment before using it," suggested Mike from my old office. The post vanished within 6 hours, a new record for social media regret. But the internet is forever, and screenshots were already making the rounds. Clara's attempt at narrative control had backfired spectacularly, like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Then came the plot twist I hadn't seen coming, though in hindsight, it was inevitable. Adrian's girlfriend, yes, he had a girlfriend this whole time, because of course he did, decided to reach out to me through LinkedIn. Her name was Sophie, and she was everything Clara wasn't: direct, honest, and refreshingly free of BS. "I think we need to talk. Adrian has been lying to both of us," her message read. Sophie, a paralegal, had been dating Adrian for 8 months, believing his story that Clara was a crazy ex-wife obsessed with him, showing up uninvited, begging for reconciliation, while he nobly tried to be there for her as a friend during her marital difficulties. The cognitive dissonance was almost impressive. Adrian had convinced his girlfriend he was a victim of Clara's obsession, while simultaneously bragging to his gym buddies about his conquest. It takes a special kind of sociopathic talent to spin 2 contradictory narratives with such confidence. I sent Sophie everything, every screenshot Jordan had uncovered, every timeline detail, every piece of evidence that painted a very different picture. Her response was swift and decisive. She dumped him publicly on Facebook, posting all the screenshots with a caption that would have made a PR. Fascinating. Adrian had gone from sensitive ex-husband needing emotional support to controlling nightmare the moment he thought he'd won. It was almost like he'd been putting on an act to steal someone else's wife, and once he'd succeeded, the mask came off. Who could have possibly seen that coming? So, you broke up? I pressed. I tried to, she said, her voice getting smaller, but he didn't take it well. He started showing up at my work, calling me constantly, telling everyone I was just having commitment issues and would come around. It was like living with a stalker. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Clara had left a stable, respectful marriage for a man who turned out to be exactly the kind of person she'd accused me of being when I questioned her weekend adventures. Life has a funny way of teaching lessons to people who refuse to learn them the easy way. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, and I actually meant it. Nobody deserves to be stalked or harassed, not even someone who'd made spectacularly poor choices. But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it. That's when she dropped the bombshell that made this whole conversation shift from pathetic to absolutely insane. I'm pregnant, she whispered, tears flowing down her cheeks like a broken faucet. And I don't know what to do. The pregnancy announcement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For a moment, I genuinely thought Clara had finally lost whatever tenuous grip on reality she'd been maintaining. I stared at her across the cafe table, watching tears stream down her face, and all I could think was, this woman has officially gone off the deep end. I started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of genuine, gut-busting laughter that happens when someone tells you something so absurd your brain can't process it any other way. Other cafe patrons started looking over at us, probably wondering if they were witnessing a proposal gone wrong or a mental breakdown. Pregnant, I repeated, wiping tears from my eyes. That's your play here? Really? After everything that's happened, you're going with a fake pregnancy angle? Her face went through several interesting color changes, confusion, hurt, anger, and then that particular shade of red when people realize their lie has been called out publicly. I'm not lying, she protested, but her voice had that hollow ring bad actors get when they're overselling their performance. Clara, I said, leaning back in my chair with the relaxed confidence of someone who holds all the cards, we haven't had sex in over 2 months. I know this because I was there, or rather, I wasn't there, if you catch my drift. You were too busy with your book club activities to be interested in your actual husband. The silence that followed was deafening. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air, clearly trying to come up with some explanation, but we both knew the math didn't work. Even Clara's creative relationship with the truth couldn't bend reality that far. It could be from before, she whispered weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. From before what? I asked. Before you decided that Adrian was more important than our marriage? Before you started spending every weekend playing house with your ex-husband? Be specific, Clara, because my calendar is pretty clear on when we stopped being intimate. She crumpled then, her whole fake pregnancy facade collapsing like a house of cards. The tears kept flowing, but now they seemed more genuine, tears of frustration and desperation rather than manipulative crocodile tears. I just needed you to care, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought if you believed I was pregnant, you'd want to work things out. You'd remember that you loved me once. And there it was, the truth, wrapped up in the most pathetic package imaginable. Clara had flown 3,000 miles to lie to my face about being pregnant because she thought it would magically erase months of betrayal and manipulation. The woman who'd given me an ultimatum about trust was now trying to manipulate me with fake medical conditions. I did love you once, I said quietly. And for the first time since she'd appeared outside my office, I felt something resembling sadness instead of just irritation. I loved you for 3 years, but you only noticed when I stopped. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks in abstract, pathetic patterns. So what now? You're just going to stay in London forever? Build a whole new life without me? That's exactly what I'm going to do, I confirmed. Because that's what people do when their marriages end. They move on. They build better lives. They don't chase their ex-spouses across international borders with fake pregnancy stories. Clara flew home that night, defeated and broken in ways that almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. But sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford when it came to someone who'd spent months systematically destroying our marriage and then expected me to fix the consequences of her choices. The real entertainment started after she got back to the States. According to my network of involuntary correspondents, mostly Leah, who seemed to think I needed regular updates on the Clara show, my ex-wife had learned nothing from our London conversation and was already back to her old patterns. 2 weeks after her failed reconciliation mission, Clara was posting Instagram stories from a CrossFit gym featuring a suspiciously attractive trainer named Damien. Because nothing says I've learned from my mistakes like immediately rebounding with another fitness professional who probably had the emotional depth of a puddle. The Instagram posts were a masterclass in self-deception. Clara was suddenly all about self-improvement and working on herself, posting inspirational quotes about how soulmates arrive when you're ready to work on yourself and the universe brings you what you need when you need it most. The irony was so thick you could package it and sell it as a dietary supplement. Meanwhile, back in London, I was discovering that Karma has a sense of humor that rivals any comedy writer. Adrian, apparently unable to learn from his previous humiliation, had somehow managed to land a job in London. Not just in London, but in the exact same corporate housing building where I was living. The universe was either testing my patience or setting up the world's most elaborate practical joke. I first encountered him in the lobby one Tuesday morning, looking every bit as smarmy as I remembered, but now with the added bonus of seeming slightly desperate. He was with a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, all legs and cheekbones, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real consequences. "Marcus!" Adrian called out, like we were old college buddies who'd lost touch, instead of two corners of a love triangle that had exploded spectacularly. "What are the odds?" "Small world, right?" He introduced the young woman as Chloe, his girlfriend, with air quotes that suggested their relationship status was about as stable as a house of cards. Chloe looked at me with mild interest, clearly not knowing she was standing next to both the victim and the perpetrator of one of the Messier relationship disasters in recent memory. "Adrian," I nodded politely, because I'd learned the best revenge is living well and not engaging with people who've already proven they're not worth your time. "Chloe, nice to meet you." By the end of that week, Chloe had dumped Adrian in the building's WhatsApp group chat after discovering his illustrious history with married women. Apparently, someone in the building had done their homework and shared the screenshots from Sophie's Facebook post. The message Chloe left was a thing of beauty. "Ladies of Riverside Court, Adrian Thompson is a serial cheater who specializes in breaking up marriages. He told me his ex-wife was crazy and obsessed with him. Turns out she was just married to someone else at the time. Also, he cries after sex. You've been warned." Within hours, everyone in our 200-unit building knew Adrian as that guy who cries after sex and breaks up marriages. His nickname evolved from book club to cry club, and residents started crossing the street to avoid him in the hallways. The beautiful thing about living in corporate housing is that gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi, and Adrian's reputation preceded him everywhere. The concierge smirked. The gym staff exchanged knowing looks. Even the cleaning lady gave him side-eye that could have melted steel. Justice served with a side of public humiliation. Exactly what the doctor ordered. Meanwhile, back in the good old US of A, Clara's relationship with Damien, the CrossFit trainer, was following the predictable trajectory of all rebound relationships that start with Instagram stories and end with restraining orders. According to my unofficial intelligence network, Leia's inability to keep her mouth shut and my own morbid curiosity, things had gone south faster than a penguin convention. The details, relayed through a series of increasingly dramatic phone calls from Leia, were almost too perfect to be true. Clara had walked into the gym one evening for her regular session with Damien, probably expecting to work on her squats and her emotional baggage simultaneously, when she discovered him in the back room helping his ex-girlfriend with some very creative stretching exercises. Now, I'm no fitness expert, but I'm pretty sure that particular position isn't recommended in any legitimate workout manual, unless Damien was pioneering some revolutionary new form of couples yoga that involved significantly less clothing and significantly more betrayal than traditional exercise routines. She just stood there for 5 minutes. Leia had breathlessly reported. Completely frozen. Damien and this other girl were so into their stretching session that they didn't even notice Clara watching them through the mirror. The image of Clara standing there, gym bag and water bottle still in hand, watching her rebound relationship implode in real time, was almost poetic. Here was a woman who destroyed her marriage for the thrill of cheating, only to discover that cheaters tend to cheat on everyone, not just other people's spouses. When Damien finally noticed Clara's reflection in the mirror, because apparently, even mid-betrayal, he was still checking himself out, the ensuing confrontation was legendary enough to become gym folklore. Clara, channeling all the righteous indignation she'd never directed at herself, launched into a tirade about trust and respect that left everyone within earshot wondering if they were witnessing performance art or a psychological breakdown. "How could you do this to me?" she'd screamed, according to multiple eyewitness accounts. "I trusted you. I thought we had something real." The irony was so thick you could have used it as a protein shake. Clara, who'd spent 3 months sneaking around with her ex-husband while married to someone else, was suddenly an expert on trust and fidelity. But wait, there's more. Because apparently, the universe wasn't finished serving up justice with a side of poetic comeuppance. Clara, in her emotional distress over discovering that cheaters tend to be cheaters, made the brilliant decision to text me about her revelation. At 3 a.m. London time, 10 p.m. her time, my phone buzzed with a message I initially thought was some kind of drunk dial. "Now I know how you felt. I'm so sorry." That was it. No context, no explanation, just a sudden burst of empathy that had apparently taken her entire relationship with Damien to develop. I stared at the message for a few minutes, marveling at the fact that it had taken Clara experiencing betrayal firsthand to understand what betrayal felt like. Revolutionary stuff, really. I left her on read. Not out of cruelty, but because what exactly was I supposed to say? "Thanks for finally developing basic human empathy after destroying our marriage? Congratulations on learning a lesson most people figure out in ELE. ING kids right away." It was like he thought he owned me or summoned Terry School? There was no response that wouldn't either encourage her delusion that we could reconcile or make me sound like a complete bastard. But karma, it turns out, was just getting warmed up. Because while Clara was dealing with her trainer boyfriend's creative interpretation of physical fitness, she was about to discover that her past decisions had consequences that extended far beyond broken hearts and damaged pride. Remember Sophie, Adrian's ex-girlfriend who'd blown up his entire operation with those beautiful Facebook screenshots? Well, Sophie worked in the tax department for the city, and she'd apparently been doing some digging into Clara's living situation. It turns out Clara's clever little scheme of using her parents' address to avoid city taxes while actually living in our apartment had caught someone's attention. Someone with access to employment records, lease agreements, and the kind of bureaucratic dedication that makes the IRS look friendly. The audit notice arrived on a Tuesday. According to Leia's breathless report, Clara had opened what she thought was junk mail to discover that the city wanted a very serious conversation about her tax obligations for the past 3 years. Specifically, they wanted to know why someone who was employed full-time in the city, had a city-issued parking permit, and was registered to vote at a city address had been claiming residency in her parents' suburban township. The amount owed was spectacular: 3 years of back taxes plus penalties plus interest, plus administrative fees that seemed to multiply like rabbits in springtime. The final tally came to just over $18,000, which might as well have been $18 million for someone who'd been living paycheck to paycheck while spending her disposable income on weekend dates with her ex-husband. Clara's parents, bless their enabling hearts, bailed her out financially. But they'd also forced her to move back into her childhood bedroom as part of the bailout agreement, because apparently even they had limits to how much financial irresponsibility they were willing to subsidize without consequences. The image of Clara, at 29 years old, moving back into her teenage bedroom with its faded boy band posters and high school trophies, was almost too perfect to be real. The woman who'd been so eager to play house with Adrian every weekend was now literally back in the house where she'd grown up, under her parents' roof and their rules. "She has a curfew now," Leia had reported with barely concealed glee. "Her mom makes her be home by 11 p.m. on weeknights and midnight on weekends. It's like she's 16 again, except with massive debt and a destroyed marriage instead of college applications and prom planning." Meanwhile, my life in London continued to improve in ways that made me question whether I'd accidentally stumbled into some sort of alternate universe where good decisions actually led to good outcomes. The promotion I'd been hoping for came through ahead of schedule, along with another salary increase that made my former American income look like pocket change. I was offered a permanent position with the company, complete with visa sponsorship and a clear path to British residency if I wanted it. But the real victory wasn't professional. It was personal. I'd met someone. Her name was Eva. She was Irish and worked as an editor for a publishing house in Bloomsbury. Smart, funny, grounded, and refreshingly free of any desire to maintain relationships with her ex-boyfriends. When I told her the book club saga over dinner one evening, she'd laughed until tears streamed down her face. "Sounds like your wife was reading the wrong chapters," she'd said. And I'd known right then that this was someone I wanted to keep around. With Eva, everything was easy. No drama, no secrets, no weekend disappearances or mysterious text messages. Just two adults building something real together, based on honesty and mutual respect. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. Every time Adrian saw me with Eva in the building lobby or the local pub, I could see the jealousy eating him alive. The man who'd thought he was winning by stealing someone else's wife was watching me build something better with someone who actually deserved it. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of timing that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. While Clara was navigating the exciting world of parental curfews and tax debt, my life in London had evolved from escaping disaster to truly thriving in ways I didn't know were possible. It's amazing how much your perspective shifts when you're not constantly wondering if your spouse is lying to you about where she's spending her weekends. Who knew that trust and honesty were such game changers in the happiness department? The promotion came with perks beyond the salary bump, though going from comfortable to holy shit, I can actually afford things without checking my bank balance first, was pretty spectacular. But the whole package, company car, expense account, and the kind of professional respect that comes from working with people who view competence as a baseline rather than an aspiration. My team was killing it in the European markets, which apparently made me some corporate golden boy. The kind of success that would have made Clara proud back when she was capable of being proud of anything that didn't involve her ex-husband. Now, it just felt like vindication, proof that I'd made the right choice when I'd walked away from that toxic situation and chosen myself for once. But the real transformation was Eva. Meeting her had been one of those random London moments that make you believe in cosmic timing. I'd been sitting in a pub in Bloomsbury after a particularly good day at work, enjoying a pint, when this woman at the next table started laughing at something on her laptop. Not polite chuckling, but the kind of genuine, infectious laughter that makes you want to know what's so funny. She'd been editing a manuscript, something about a man trying to win back his ex-wife by pretending to be a food critic, and the absurdity had struck her as hilarious. When she noticed me trying not to eavesdrop, she'd shared the joke, and we'd ended up talking until the pub closed. Eva was everything Clara wasn't. Where Clara was all surface-level drama and emotional manipulation, Eva was substance and authenticity. She said what she meant what she said, and never once made me wonder if she was secretly texting someone else while sitting next to me. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. When I told her the whole book club saga over dinner one night, she'd listened with the kind of attention that suggested she was actually interested in understanding what had happened rather than just waiting for her turn to talk. "So, let me get this straight," she'd said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Your ex-wife spent 3 months cheating on you with her ex-husband, gave you an ultimatum about trusting her, and then flew to London to lie about being pregnant when you took her up on that ultimatum? That's condensed version, yes. And now she's living with her parents because she got caught committing tax fraud? Also, yes. Sounds like your wife was reading the wrong chapters, she concluded. That line became our private joke. Anytime we encountered relationship drama, one of us would comment about people reading the wrong chapters. With Eva, everything was refreshingly normal. We traveled without it becoming a logistical nightmare or an excuse for Instagram content. We cooked together without turning it into a competition or a therapy session. We built something real, based on actually liking each other as people, rather than just being addicted to the drama and chaos that some people mistake for passion. The contrast wasn't lost on me, especially when I'd see Adrian around the building. Poor Adrian, who'd gone from thinking he was the main character in some romantic drama to being the punchline of everyone's jokes. The man couldn't walk through the lobby without someone making a book club reference or asking if he needed tissues. His professional life hadn't flourished either. Word travels fast in corporate circles, especially when someone has a reputation for breaking up marriages for sport. Adrian's career trajectory had gone from promising transfer to "why is that guy still here?" in record time. But the real entertainment came from watching him try to process seeing me happy, actually, genuinely happy, not just pretending to be fine while dying inside. When Adrian saw me with Eva, laughing at her jokes, holding her hand, looking like someone who'd finally figured out what healthy relationships were supposed to feel like, the jealousy in his eyes was absolutely priceless. This was the man who'd thought he was winning by stealing Clara away from me, who'd bragged to his gym buddies about his conquest, who'd convinced himself he was some sort of romantic hero rescuing a woman from an unhappy marriage. Now he was watching me build something infinitely better with someone who actually deserved it, while he lived alone in corporate housing with a reputation that followed him like a bad smell. The irony was beautiful. Adrian had gotten exactly what he wanted, Clara. And discovered that winning a prize nobody else wants isn't actually winning at all. Meanwhile, I'd lost something I thought I wanted to keep and found something infinitely better in the process. Eva and I started talking about making things permanent. Not in the rushed, desperate way people do when trying to fix something broken, but in the calm, confident way that happens when you've found someone who just makes sense. British residency, long-term plans, the kind of future building that actually felt exciting rather than terrifying. The company had offered to sponsor my permanent residency, putting me on track for British citizenship. The idea of officially cutting ties with the country where my marriage imploded, and becoming a citizen of the place where I finally figured out how to be happy, felt like the ultimate fresh start. Not running away from my problems, but graduating from them into something better. Every weekend with Eva was a reminder of what weekends were supposed to feel like. No mystery plans, no secret meetings, no wondering if the person you loved was lying to your face. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, building memories instead of collecting secrets. We'd take day trips to Bath or Brighton, explore different London neighborhoods, or just spend lazy Sundays reading in bed while rain pattered against the windows. Simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after 3 years of marriage to someone who treated our relationship like a part-time job she was constantly trying to quit. And the best part? Adrian got to watch it all unfold since we lived in the same building. Every time he saw us together, coming back from a weekend trip, heading out for dinner, or just walking through the lobby looking like people who actually liked each other, I could see it eating away at him. This was the life he'd thought he was destroying when he'd seduced Clara away from me. Instead, he'd done me the biggest favor of my life by removing someone who was never going to make me happy and clearing the path for someone who actually could. Karma, it turned out, had a sense of poetry that would make Shakespeare weep with envy. Ending, looking back on this whole clusterfuck of a year, I have exactly one regret, not taking the London job the first time they offered it. Not the second, but definitely not the first. I could have saved myself months of watching my marriage decompose like roadkill in the summer heat, months of pretending that Clara's weekend book club activities were anything other than a slow-motion betrayal set to the soundtrack of my own denial. The truth is, I'd been sacrificing pieces of myself for someone who never valued the sacrifice. While I was turning down dream opportunities and restructuring my entire future around Clara's unwillingness to leave her precious hometown, she was busy restructuring her weekends around her ex-husband's emotional needs. The math never worked in my favor, but I'd been too invested in the sunk cost fallacy to notice. You know what's funny about hindsight? It's not just 20/20ths. It's high-definition, IMAX quality clarity that makes you wonder how you ever missed the obvious signs that your life was turning into a daytime soap opera. Every red flag I'd ignored, every excuse I'd accepted, every time I'd chosen to trust someone who was systematically proving herself untrustworthy, it all looked so painfully clear from my Thames View apartment in London. Clara's social media presence these days is a masterclass in performative healing. She posts those cryptic, inspirational quotes divorced people love so much: growth through pain, stronger than yesterday, the universe removes people from your life to make room for better things. All with comments turned off, because apparently, enlightenment doesn't include being open to feedback. My personal favorite was her recent post about learning to love yourself. For you can love someone else, rich, coming from someone who'd spent our entire marriage seeking validation from every man except her actual husband. But hey, if Instagram quotes about self-discovery help her sleep at night in her childhood bedroom, more power to her. Adrian's online presence, meanwhile, has become virtually non-existent. The man who used to post gym selfies and motivational content about grinding and winning has gone dark, probably because it's hard to maintain a personal brand around success when everyone knows you as book club or cry club, depending on which scandal they remember better. Last I heard, through the London corporate housing gossip network, he'd been trying to transfer back to the States. But apparently, his reputation had followed him across the Atlantic like a particularly persistent curse. Turns out that breaking up marriages and crying after sex aren't exactly the kind of qualifications that make HR departments excited about internal transfers. The beautiful thing about karma is that it doesn't just serve justice, it serves justice with style. Adrian had thought he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But it turned out he was actually playing Russian roulette with his own reputation, while everyone else was just living their lives like functional adults. And me? I'm building a life that actually makes sense. A life with someone who doesn't need an ex-husband to feel complete, who doesn't mistake drama for passion, and who thinks the concept of book club as code for cheating is as ridiculous as it actually is. Eva and I are planning a trip to Ireland next month to meet her family, which feels like the kind of normal relationship milestone that Clara and I never managed to achieve without turning it into a crisis or an excuse for her to reconnect with someone from her past. It's amazing how simple things become when you're with someone who actually wants to be with you. The visa paperwork for permanent residency is moving along faster than expected, which means I'll officially be a British resident by the end of the year. There's something poetic about legally cutting ties with the country where my marriage imploded and officially becoming a citizen of the place where I finally figured out how to be happy. To all the people back home who said I should have fought harder for Clara, I have one question: why? Why fight for someone who gave me an ultimatum about trusting her while she was busy proving herself untrustworthy? Why battle for a marriage with someone who was already emotionally checked out and planning her next relationship? Fighting for your marriage makes sense when both people want to save it, it's romantic and noble and all those things that look good in movies. But fighting to keep someone who doesn't want to be kept is just elaborate self-harm disguised as love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go so they can discover firsthand that the grass isn't actually greener on the other side. Clara wanted to explore her options. I gave her that opportunity by removing myself as an option. She wanted to see if Adrian was worth more than our marriage. I let her find out. She wanted freedom from our relationship. I provided it, along with a front row seat to watch what that freedom actually looked like in practice. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, but it also has impeccable timing. Every time I look out at the Thames from my apartment, or book a weekend trip to Paris with Eva, or get another promotion at work, I'm reminded that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't build a life worth living on the foundation of someone else's indifference. Claire is living in her childhood bedroom, dealing with tax debt and parental supervision, because she chose drama over stability. Adrian's reputation is so toxic that even LinkedIn recruiters probably cross the street when they see his profile. And I'm planning Christmas market tours with someone who thinks my jokes are actually funny and doesn't need to check her phone every 5 minutes to feel validated. The math works out pretty clearly when you actually do the calculation. I don't hate Clara anymore. Hate requires too much emotional energy, and frankly, I've got better things to do with my feelings these days. I don't even feel sorry for her, because everything that happened to her was the direct result of her own choices. She wanted to play adult games, and she got adult prizes. If anything, I'm grateful. Grateful that she was stupid enough to give me that ultimatum. Grateful that she made her priorities so obvious that even my denial couldn't rationalize them away. Grateful that she freed me from a marriage that was slowly killing everything good about who I used to be. Sometimes people do you the biggest favor of your life by showing you exactly who they are. Clara showed me that she was someone who would choose her ex-husband over her actual husband. Someone who would lie and manipulate and blame everyone else for the consequences of her actions. And in showing me who she really was, she also showed me who I could become, someone who refuses to settle for less than he deserves. Someone who chooses happiness over familiarity. Someone who finally learned that you can't love someone into being worthy of that love. Every morning when I wake up in London, in my beautiful apartment, with my beautiful life and my beautiful girlfriend who actually wants to be there, I smile and think the same thing: I finally chose myself, and it was the best decision I ever made.